The Galactic Council exiled humanity, hoping to forget them forever. But in exile, humans became a shadow forged from steel, fury, and silence. When they returned, they didn't ask. They erased entire empires and carved their name into the fabric of reality. Even the ancient ones who unmade civilizations without a trace paused before a flame that could not be extinguished. Humanity didn't win. They became eternal. Stay with us if you want to find out how the story ends, and don't forget to subscribe. For centuries, the Galactic Council kept humanity in the shadows. They monitored Earth's growth like one watches a contagious disease, never with curiosity, always with containment. When humans discovered faster-than-light travel, the Council didn't celebrate a new addition to galactic society, they panicked. The response was immediate and absolute: exile. Every colony beyond the Sol system was dismantled. Trade routes were severed. Diplomats vanished. Any species that dared communicate with humanity faced sanctions, embargoes, even orbital strikes. Earth was cast into the void, labeled as unstable, dangerous, and ultimately forgettable. They believed isolation would break the species. They underestimated what humanity becomes when left alone. The year was 2961. Earth no longer resembled the helpless world the Council thought it exiled. Forced to survive without allies, humanity had adapted with terrifying speed. Their technology had outgrown even the most advanced Council races. Where the bureaucratic empires had stagnated, humans had evolved. Warships, sleek and brutal, were built from scavenged alloys and desperation. Energy weapons powered by fractured stars needed a fraction of the output of Council beam arrays. Soldiers weren't just trained, they were enhanced, modified, optimized. Isolation hadn't destroyed them. It had forged them into something no longer recognizable. In the cold shadow of the Kuiper Belt, a forgotten mining station flickered to life. Within it, General Elias Kane stood before a glowing tactical map, the stars riddled with red markers. Around him, Earth's most brilliant and brutal strategists held their breath. "We're done hiding," Kane said. No one argued. Across the solar system, hidden fleets came online. Hangars unsealed. Centuries of silence cracked open, revealing monsters humanity had built in secret. The Black Armada, Phantom Division, Revenant Corps. Fleets with no insignia. Soldiers with no identity. Ships made not for exploration, but for vengeance. Operation Revenant had begun. And the Council didn't even know it. They still believed the rumors that Earth was broken, its people scavenging through the ruins of their brief relevance. They were too busy with their petty trade disputes and interspecies rivalries. 1,000 systems wide, and they saw everything but the truth. Until their ships started vanishing. It began with whispers. Convoys disappearing along outer trade routes. Deep space comms falling silent. Patrol fleets failing to check in. Pirates, they said. Statistical noise. Then came the Ajari Vindicator, a Council flagship found adrift near Orion, its crew missing, and its weapon systems fried, without a single shot fired. Next, a classified research facility on the edge of Alpha Draconis went dark. When recovery teams arrived, they found walls scorched with 3 words. "We remember." No translation was needed. The script was human. Still, the Council hesitated. Still, they believed it was isolated. Deep beneath Antarctica, in a facility buried beneath miles of ice and secrecy, General Kane activated Earth's final war protocol. In front of him, Commander Asha Varma, head of Phantom Division, reviewed a list of targets glowing across the galaxy. "They still don't know it's us," she said. "They will," Kane answered. "We need something louder." Admiral Nix, head of the Black Armada, stepped forward. Her eyes, surgically altered for low-light command, reflected the map like 2 cold stars. "There's a fortress world in the Tidy system. Outer Council territory. Heavy defenses. Untouchable by conventional standards." Kane didn't hesitate. "Then that's the one." The room fell silent. To attack a Council world was an act of war. But then again, so was exile. Across Titan's hidden shipyards, humanity's war machine roared awake. Ships that had never been seen by alien eyes slipped from dry dock. Each was cloaked in black plating that absorbed light like a singularity. Their engines were silent. Their weapons untraceable. Crews moved like parts of a single living organism, born and bred for one purpose. Not to negotiate. To end. The Black Armada deployed from Saturn orbit. Hundreds of ships. Thousands of soldiers. And no return orders. Above Tidy, Council scanners showed nothing. Their defense satellites flickered once, then went blind. Ground control tried to re-establish communication with orbit. Static. Then the sky caught fire. The first salvo came from invisible positions. Orbital guns vaporized before power warnings even registered. Defense platforms melted mid-transmission. The Council fortress, long thought impenetrable, became a beacon of destruction. And then, the shadows dropped. Phantom Division descended from the sky like nightmares. Wearing adaptive cloaks, they moved between radar blinks. They didn't fight battles, they executed plans. By the time Council soldiers scrambled into position, The command center had already fallen. Doors blown inward. Systems gutted. Officers dead in their chairs. Varma walked over the smoking ruins of the primary defense node and left a single phrase scorched into the command table. We have not forgotten. We have not forgiven. The attack on Tidy shattered the illusion of control. On Varus Prime, the capital of the Galactic Council, panic bled through diplomatic halls like poison through veins. Footage of the destroyed fortress world streamed across every secure channel. Fires raged. Bodies lay in alien streets. Defense towers that once symbolized invincibility were nothing but twisted wreckage. Senator Thor of the Yari Empire slammed a clawed fist on the council chamber's central table. This is impossible. Humanity was neutralized. Chancellor Ver said nothing. He stared at the screen at the last transmission from Tidy. The human message carved into metal and ash. We have not forgotten. We have not forgiven. His mandibles clicked involuntarily. We were fools, he muttered. We thought they'd vanish. We crushed them, as they're hissed, as we should have done centuries ago. We gather the fleets, and we burn Earth to the core. But then another voice cut through the uproar, soft, sharp, unblinking. No. High strategist Elvin of the Cathy Dominion didn't raise her voice. She never had to. Of all the species in the council, hers had produced the greatest tacticians for millennia. They've struck a world we deemed untouchable, she said. With technology we can't track. With tactics we can't predict. This was not desperation. It was calculation. Her many black eyes blinked in perfect sync. Humanity no longer fears us. But we should fear them. Back in the Sol system, Admiral Nix stood aboard Nemesis, watching the burn trails left behind by the obliterated council fleet over Tidy. Her jaw was tight. Her silver eyes reflected nothing but cold momentum. They know we're back, she said into the comms. Good, Kane replied from the Warborn Command Center on Earth. Now we show them what happens when you exile humanity. And the council responded exactly as expected. Within days, they mobilized the largest fleet the galaxy had seen in centuries. Thousands of warships, drawn from every major species. Planet crackers. World burners. Juggernauts that hadn't fired a cannon since the last empire was erased. Vera Prime broadcast a declaration of war to every corner of the known galaxy. Humanity has defied our judgment, Chancellor Vor proclaimed, his voice echoing across stars. It chose war. And now, it shall be purged. The mistake of their survival ends now. Across dozens of systems, factories roared. Docks overran with conscripts. Their campaign had begun. But they had no idea what they were walking into. On Earth, Kane reviewed incoming fleet data. Hundreds of markers. Thousands. All converging on Sol. Perfect, he whispered. Commander Verma stood at his side. They're throwing everything they have. Then they've already lost. Nick said from the corner, arms folded. Because the council still didn't understand what humanity had become. They didn't understand the phantom fleets, stealth warships capable of phasing between dimensions, emerging within enemy formations like ghosts with teeth. They didn't understand the Legion protocol, AI-driven battle synchronizers linking every human soldier into a hive of reaction and response. Instant communication, instant decisions, instant death. They didn't understand Project Revenant, soldiers built, not born, bio-enhanced, nervous systems reinforced with conductive alloys, immune to fear, fatigue, and failure. They didn't understand that exile hadn't made humanity disappear. It had made them hunters. When the Council's first wave entered Sol, they expected resistance. They found silence. No fleets. No planetary defenses. Just the black quiet of a trap about to snap shut. Then the mines triggered. Invisible charges tore through the lead ships, detonating inside their cores. Energy storms ignited from nowhere, ripping through control systems. Viruses whispered through their firewalls. Code that had no known source, no language, no pattern. And then Oblivion-class warships uncloaked within their formations. The Phantom Fleet had arrived. They struck like phantoms, slicing through capital ships, targeting command nodes, severing comms between vessels before anyone could shout. The Council's formations collapsed in hours. Ships turned to flee, but found their exits already mined, already sealed. They had walked into a killing field sculpted over generations. Legionnaires deployed next, drop pods like falling stars, slamming into enemy hulls, breaching with microfusion charges. They moved through corridors like liquid death, silent, surgical, unstoppable. Entire crews tried to surrender. No one was left to report it. By the end of the day, the first wave of the Council's vengeance was nothing but debris. And Earth hadn't fired a single ground-based weapon. On Varus Prime, the Council chamber descended into chaos. Reports flooded in, fleets destroyed, commanders missing, comms blacked out. Senator Thor screamed again. This is madness. They're not supposed to be able to. We miscalculated, Elvin said calmly. We believed exile weakened them. It forged them instead. She stood. "We are not hunting humanity anymore," she said. "They are hunting us." Back in Seoul, Admiral Nix stared at the wreckage drifting between Mars and Jupiter. "This is just the beginning," she said. General Kane watched the stars. "They wanted war," he said, his voice low and final. "Now we give them extinction." The galaxy had never seen war like this. It wasn't just fleets burning. It was silence spreading like a virus. One by one, Council systems went dark, some with explosions, others with nothing but a final breath of static before vanishing from the network. At first, the Council tried to fight back. They launched coordinated campaigns across multiple sectors, sending elite task forces to reinforce border worlds and industrial hubs. Entire species contributed their best and brightest, deploying fleets that stretched across light years. But for every fleet they sent, humanity was already waiting. The Black Armada moved like a phantom storm. Ships phased into reality just long enough to destroy planetary defenses, then vanished again. Ground assaults were nearly extinct. There was no time. Council garrisons were crushed by orbital strikes before soldiers could grab their weapons. Command centers collapsed into rubble, AI cores shredded by cyber-saboteurs. On Kvara Prime, the ruling family of the Vornathi Empire awoke to find their planetary palace breached. No alarms. No warning. Just a squad of faceless human operatives standing in silence as the entire bloodline was erased. On Draknir 4, the warlords of the Yari Empire launched a final rally to inspire resistance. The capital city was leveled overnight. No survivors. No explanations. On the Oz, a council shipyard world responsible for producing 70% of their dreadnought-class vessels. The entire planet went up in flame when human agents triggered cascading reactor failures in every orbital foundry. The explosion was visible from 5 systems away. In the war chambers of Varus Prime, Chancellor Vor screamed at his advisors. "They're not fighting to win territory. They're not establishing dominance. They're erasing us." Strategist Elvin only nodded. "This is not conquest," she said. "It's cleansing." Across the Sol system, Earth remained untouched. Not because the Council couldn't reach it, because they no longer dared to. Every attempt to approach the system ended in disaster. Ships lost navigation. Crews turned against each other. In one incident, a Council destroyer went silent, only to be found drifting, engines cold, its crew locked in stasis chambers with no memory of the last 72 hours. The message was clear. "You may reach the stars, but you will never reach us." Deep within Earth's orbital command center, General Kane addressed his surviving commanders. "We're past the point of diplomacy," he said. Around him stood Admiral Nix, expression unreadable behind her pale eyes. Commander Asha Varma, her cybernetics humming with data flows. And Liat Orion, leader of the Revenant Corps, his body more alloy than bone, arms folded across a chest carved by engineered muscle. "They exiled us," Kane said. "They tried to forget us. They failed." He looked to Nix. "And if they surrender?" she asked. Kane didn't blink. "They won't." A pause. And then Varma said what no one else dared. "And if they do?" Nix answered, voice sharp as a blade. "Then we don't accept." Varus Prime, the last jewel of the Council, watched, paralyzed, as the war tore through its fringes. Cities once gleaming now stood empty. Spaceports abandoned. Planets offline. But Ver still refused to yield. "We still have the core worlds," he barked. "Humanity hasn't reached them. As long as Vera Prime stands, we endure." General Threxus of the Drar Empire, one of the Council's last veteran commanders, stepped forward. "With respect, Chancellor, if humanity reaches this world, it's not a siege. It's a funeral." But Vor slammed his hand on the war table. "Then we make our stand." They had one chance left. One last fleet. Every remaining ship. Every last soldier. Every planetary gun turned skyward. It wouldn't matter. In the void beyond Vera Prime, the sky began to bleed. The Black Armada arrived like Death Manifest, thousands of ships moving in eerie formation, their matte black hulls reflecting no starlight. They didn't rush. They didn't speak. They didn't even fire. They advanced. And with every kilometer closed, the Council's desperation deepened. Stealth cruisers blinked between dimensions, warping behind defense lines and cutting them down from within. Legionnaires dropped from orbit in clusters, moving through cities like ghosts. Firewalls crumbled. Power grids failed. Command systems turned on themselves. In the planetary war room, the final alarm screamed. "They're already inside the defense grid." "How?" "We had every system." "They took control before they arrived," Elvin said simply. "We lost this war before the first battle." And then the lights flickered. Doors locked. From the shadows, the operatives emerged, black armor, silent guns, unblinking eyes. They killed with mechanical precision. One by one, Council leaders collapsed over the very table they'd once ruled the galaxy from. Last to fall was Chancellor Vor. He gasped for air, blood pooling across the polished floor. And from the shadows, Kane stepped forward. You should have finished the job, Kane said, his voice quiet. Then he did it for them. Within hours, Vera Prime burned. Smoke coiled through once pristine avenues. Towers collapsed in silent ruin. No enemy ships pursued the fleeing refugees. There were no survivors to report to. The Galactic Council was no more. And in its place, the galaxy fell under the eye of one terrible truth. Humanity had come home. The war was over. Not in the sense that peace had been signed or the last shot fired, but in the way a forest fire ends a forest, it left no space for opposition, no path for recovery. The Galactic Council, once a colossus spanning hundreds of species and thousands of star systems, now existed only as ash and echo. There were no negotiations. There were no survivors to sign them. Across the stars, a new name whispered like a warning, the Human Dominion. But humanity did not build its empire on celebration. There were no fireworks, no anthem, no golden age. Only the cold, relentless continuation of purpose. The capital was not Earth. Earth had become myth, untouched, silent, encircled by defense grids so advanced that even its orbit was a dead zone. The stories varied. Some said the surface was fully automated. Others, that no living being remained there at all. Aliens spoke of Earth with reverence and terror. No one approached. The real seat of power was Draxus 4. Once an industrial hub for the Council, now it pulsed with activity. Factories that had once built freighters and orbital transports now forged something else, warships by the hour, drones by the second. The skies were choked with smoke and fury. And above it all loomed the horizon's end, the Dominion's floating command citadel, its spire casting a shadow that stretched for kilometers. General Elias Kane, now Supreme Executive Kane, stood at the center of the storm. His council was not elected. It was earned. Admiral Nix, commander of the Black Armada. Ashavarma, the ghost of Phantom Division. Liat Orion, High Marshal of the Revenant Corps. No diplomats. No politicians. Only executioners in armor. The galaxy quickly learned what it meant to live under human rule. For those who surrendered, there was order. They were allowed to exist, but barely. Surveillance was constant. Their fleets were limited to defensive platforms. Trade was taxed so heavily it served more as tribute. Reconstruction was allowed, but never restoration. For those who resisted, there was only silence. The Yari tried to make a final stand in the Calvani's Nebula. The Dominion erased their entire fleet in one night. Their homeworld was glassed. No one even recovered the rubble. The Vadi believed they could hide in the asteroid fields of Vartel and wage guerrilla war. It lasted 36 hours. They were never heard from again. But it wasn't only terror that kept the stars in line, it was understanding. The Dominion didn't bluff. When it promised destruction, it delivered. When it warned of consequences, it made examples. And still, in the darkest corners of space, something stirred. They came as rumors. Broken signals. Ancient frequencies whispering in forgotten tongues. Exploration fleets went missing. Long-range probes returned with data that couldn't be parsed. A single anomaly began to echo across Dominion systems, a pulse, faint and rhythmic. It didn't match any known technology. And it wasn't of Council origin. It was something older. And it was watching. On board Horizon's End, Supreme Executive Kane reviewed the transmission for the 15th time. It didn't speak in words. It vibrated in patterns, quantum signatures that folded and refolded into new shapes every time they were observed. Admiral Nix stood at his side, arms crossed. Nothing in the archives. Not even the Council's deep relic scans. That's what concerns me, Kane said. Asha Varma leaned forward. Her implants pulsed faintly as she interpreted the signal faster than any AI. This isn't a message, she said. It's an invitation. To what? Kane asked. Varma hesitated. Something that's been waiting. A task force was assembled. The Spearhead Fleet, dozens of Dominion warships, led by the Iron Vow, humanity's most advanced battleship, launched beyond the edge of known space. Their orders were simple. Follow the signal. Track it to its source. Understand it, or destroy it. For weeks, they passed through forgotten voids. Systems untouched since before Earth's first satellites launched. Signs of vanished civilizations. Worlds shattered by forces unknown. Structures carved into moons, etched with glyphs that responded to no language, yet still hummed with dormant energy. And then, they arrived. It was not a planet. Not anymore. A shattered world, cracked down its core like it had been broken deliberately. Its orbit choked with debris. Fragments of a civilization so advanced its ruins pulsed with energy even after eons. But the signal was stronger here. It was alive. The Iron Vow held position over the broken surface. Drones descended. The planet's crust, though fractured, still held architecture. Towers of black metal, riddled with ancient circuitry. Symbols glowing green in patterns that shifted when watched too closely. And at the center of it all stood a monolith. A spire so tall it pierced the lower ionosphere, perfectly smooth, untouched by time or gravity. Then the signal changed. Every speaker aboard the Iron Vow crackled, and a voice emerged, not spoken, not translated, but understood in every human mind. You are not the first. The words echoed like prophecy. We watch the rise of others. Watch them conquer. Watch them fall. You think yourself supreme. You are only the next chapter. Then the voice laughed. A deep, resonant, inhuman sound. And beneath the monolith, something awoke. The planet shuddered beneath the iron vow. Not from tectonics. Not from atmosphere. From activation. The monolith pulsed. Not visually, but through gravity, magnetism, reality itself. Space warped around it in gentle waves. Instruments aboard the iron vow overloaded one by one. Time sensors desynced. Mass scanners fluctuated. Half the fleet's AI cores locked into recursive loops, unsure what was real. And then came the rupture. It wasn't a warp breach or a hyperspace signature. It was a hole in space, a wound torn into the fabric of the universe. It opened silently just beyond the shattered world, and through it emerged ships. Or something pretending to be. They had no identifiable hulls, no heat signatures, no engines, no sound. Their forms twisted in and out of comprehension, like they existed sideways to reality. Eyes burned to look at them. Sensors screamed and went blind. And they didn't move toward humanity. They simply hovered, watching. On the bridge of the Iron Vow, Admiral Nix stared at the impossible. "What are we looking at?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Asha Verma didn't answer at first. Her implants struggled to process the enemy's structure. Then she said, "We're not looking at ships." "What then?" "Predators." Kane stood rigid at the observation deck, hands clenched behind his back. "Do they see us as prey?" "They're not here for us," Verma said quietly. And she was right. The black ships turned. Not toward the Dominion fleet. Toward the galaxy. And then they vanished. Not jumped. Not flew. Vanished. Like they'd never existed. A single whisper echoed through the bridge speakers. "You were warned." Suddenly, it all clicked. This had never been a signal. It had been a test. And humanity had triggered something it didn't understand. Moments later, reports flooded in from the farthest edges of Dominion space. Colonies gone. Entire systems. Omega 4, one of Earth's strongest fortress worlds, reduced to silence in under 3 minutes. No wreckage. No transmissions. No evidence. Just gone. The Iron Vow raced back toward Sol. Spearhead fleet followed. There was no debate, only grim realization. The hunters had become the hunted. Back in the Warborn Command Center, Kane studied the cascading reports, fleet losses, system anomalies, broken physics. And always the same final message before contact was lost. "We remember." The Forgotten had returned. Admiral Nix took 6 fleets to Draxus, 7, the Dominion's core shipyard and logistics hub. Every ship carried prototype weapons, reality anchors, experimental shielding. They were prepared for anything. Except what came. The black ships didn't warp in. They arrived instantly. Like they'd always been there, just unseen. Nix ordered a full barrage. Thousands of weapons fired. Every missile, every beam, every gravity shell. They passed through the enemy. No impact. No resistance. The Dominion's deadliest weapons phased through them as if they weren't real at all. Then came the darkness. Not a weapon. Not a beam. Just erasure. Ships blinked out mid-flight. Bridges fell silent. Crews stopped breathing without injury. No explosion. No fire. Just sudden non-existence. Less than 10% of the fleet escaped. Draxus 7 was lost. Back on Earth's final orbiting stronghold, Kane watched the feed in grim silence. "This isn't war," he said. "It's memory control," Asha replied. "They're rewriting reality, deleting history, erasing us before we can even leave a scar." Nix returned with a fractured fleet and a fractured stare. "They can't be fought," she said. "Not with ships. Not with tactics." Kane didn't argue. "We don't fight them," he said. "We make sure we're remembered." The plan was insane. Desperate. Human. They called it Project Eternal Flame. The objective wasn't survival. It was defiance. They would burn their identity into the structure of space-time itself, using every quantum archive, every neural core, every planetary AI. They would encode humanity's history, its will, its scream, into the fabric of the galaxy. So even if they were erased, the echo would remain. It wouldn't stop the Forgotten, but it would mean humanity wasn't forgotten too. The last remaining Dominion forces deployed across the Sol system. Beacons were activated on every moon, every asteroid, every orbital ring. They didn't transmit data, they infused it into subspace, a resonance signal that no weapon could silence. When the black ships came, Earth didn't resist. It declared. Supreme Executive Kane stood aboard Horizon's end, his eyes on the swirling shadows forming at the edge of the system. Activated. Across the solar system, The eternal flame ignited. A wave of light, massive, timeless, surged outward. Not visible, not tangible, but real. A resonance that wrapped itself around stars and memory. And then Earth burned. The black ships fell like knives. One by one, the planets went silent. But not the signal. Long after the Dominion fell, long after the last human was gone, the galaxy still whispered. We were here. The war was lost. But it did not end. The Forgotten had done what no force in galactic history could. They erased humanity. Not through battle, not by overwhelming numbers, but by making them cease to be. No wreckage, no corpses, no ruins, nothing. Entire worlds, once brimming with industry and iron-fisted order, were now just empty coordinates. Planets that once fed the Dominion War engine were reduced to geological silence. Fleets that had burned through empires were absent even from gravitational memory. And yet, something remained. The eternal flame. A pulse buried deep in subspace. It didn't carry voices. It didn't ask for rescue. It didn't even scream. It echoed. Through the bones of dead stars. Across the seams of fractured space. Past the edge of understanding. A whisper carried on a frequency older than math. We were here. The Forgotten had silenced humanity's existence, but they couldn't erase its defiance. In the aftermath, civilizations that once cowered under Dominion rule began to stir. At first, with caution, then with awe. Because the flame didn't fade. In fact, it grew. The signal rooted itself in cosmic anomalies, fed on stellar decay, weaved itself through quantum memory fields where even the Forgotten's unmaking touch could not reach. Black holes pulsed with its rhythm. Dead suns blinked in its tempo. It became the heartbeat of resistance. In the ruined remnants of a shattered observatory orbiting Corral's wake, an alien scientist of the Tharnic cast decoded fragments of the eternal flame. The data wasn't just information, it was emotion. Pride, rage, hope, memory. The transmission had no beginning, no end, just one truth. We burned so they couldn't forget us. From the void between galaxies, an ancient AI, older than the Council, older than stars, reactivated. It had once served a race long vanished. Now it found something new to protect. It began rebuilding, reconfiguring, reshaping its purpose around the eternal flame. Other species followed. Scattered refugees from crushed systems, enslaved worlds, silenced histories. They had all once lived in the shadows of the Council and later under the dominion of Earth. Now they stood in a galaxy with neither. And still, the flame whispered. It did not demand vengeance. It offered blueprints. Ideas encoded in gravitational harmonics. Memories stored in the spin of neutron particles. Weapons. Ships. Tactics. But also, warnings. Do not build an empire. Do not seek to dominate. Remember us not as rulers, but as proof that fire can burn even the void. In time, the galaxy began to change. It didn't unify. There was no second council, no second dominion. Instead, something new began to form. Fractured worlds linked by memory, not conquest. Coalitions built not on fear, but on shared scars. And all of them whispered the same phrase in 1,000 alien tongues. Humanity stood. Humanity fell. But humanity will never be forgotten. But far beyond their reach, beyond known stars, the Forgotten stirred again. Because the flame had done more than echo. It had challenged them. And something ancient within that unknowable force had heard the challenge and remembered. The monolith on the broken world still stood. Still pulsed. But now, a second signal flickered to life beside it. Not human. Not alien. Something in between. On a drifting satellite from a lost species, a message appeared without origin. Your turn. Who sent it? What it meant? No one knew. But they all understood the feeling behind it. Because even in death, humanity had done the impossible. They had made the unknown hesitate. The galaxy changed, not with thunder, but with memory. No new empire rose to replace the Dominion. No conquerors filled the void. Instead, across stars once ruled by iron and silence, pockets of civilization began to realign, not around control, but around a question. What was it about humanity that made even the Forgotten pause? They studied the flame like scripture. Some interpreted it as defiance incarnate, others as a final plea. Some called it the death song, the last scream of a race that refused to vanish quietly. Others believed it was a virus, a data contagion, a philosophical infection now spreading through the minds and machines of every sentient being who dared to listen. They were all wrong, and they were all right. The eternal flame was humanity distilled, not its biology, not its military doctrine, but its insistence, its refusal to accept oblivion. The flame was decoded differently by every race. For the Morthan Ascendancy, it was a tactical archive, raw battle data, filled with strategies and ship formations that no longer required context. They restructured their fleets into multi-layered units based on the Black Armada's phasing patterns, adopting aggression into their ancient doctrine of patience. For the insectoid Trinex collective, it was an awakening. Their hive minds merged with the encoded memory patterns left by the Legion protocol. Now, each Trinex drone whispered fragments of human thought into its swarm, spreading stories it had never lived, feeling grief it had never earned. For the Vari scholars of the Lightseam Rift, the flame was philosophy. They meditated on the message encoded in gravitational ripples around dead stars, drawing lines between defiance and identity. Their temples pulsed in sync with the quantum frequency left behind by Earth's last breath. And slowly, something began to emerge. Not an empire, not a government, but a movement. A network of worlds, linked not by rulers or fleets, but by the shared belief that existence was sacred only if it fought to exist. They called it the Concordance, a coalition of remembrance. Ships began to bear markings not of their species, but of the flame, an emblem of a burning sun cracked down its core, light bleeding through. Their motto, taken from the last known human battle log, echoed across their systems. They tried to forget us, so we made forgetting impossible. But the forgotten hadn't stopped. Their black ships still drifted at the edge of reality, appearing without warning, consuming without explanation. Yet now, something was different. They hesitated. Not always, but sometimes. Enough for whispers to begin in hidden frequencies. The flame hurts them, not physically, existentially. The flame burned through entropy, through silence, through the very idea of erasure. And in that defiance, it defied them. Ashavarma's memory echo, encoded deep in the final moments of Earth's defense network, resurfaced in one decoded fragment. If we can't survive, we'll outlive survival. And in those words, the galaxy found courage. On the world of Exile 6, a new species, just entering interstellar travel, discovered the flame embedded in neutrino broadcasts from a dead moon. They didn't understand the language, but they understood the shape of sacrifice. They built their first ship and named it Vox. And they launched it not to conquer, but to bear witness. Elsewhere, deep within the Orc ghost field, a scavenger craft stumbled upon an ancient wreck. What remained of the Iron Val? Its outer hull was fractured, its AI core long since silent. But within its shattered black box, a final audio log activated, untouched by time. It was General Kane's voice, raspy, broken, calm. "You're still out there," he said. "Watching, testing, judging. We don't need your approval. We just needed you to know. We never stopped fighting." The transmission ended with a single tone, a heartbeat, one that kept repeating. Into eternity. The heartbeat echoed. Through the wreck of the Iron Val. Through the black hulls of Concordant scouts drifting near ancient war zones. Through the bones of forgotten empires. Through the minds of species born centuries after Earth had burned. And beyond them all, into the void where the forgotten listened. They had no language, no faces, no laws. Only one purpose: erase, cleanse, maintain the purity of the cosmic equation by pruning those who grew too loud. But humanity had done the unthinkable. They had not survived. They had not conquered. They had defied extinction itself. The flame had left an impression on the universal fabric. Not a weapon, not a fleet, not a flag. A scar that could not be smoothed over. The forgotten did not feel fear. Not in any conventional way. But for the first time in 1,000 galactic cycles, they hesitated. Because in their cold logic, something failed to compute. Every race they had erased before had vanished. No signal, no echo, not even a memory. But humanity refused to vanish. Even now, long after every city had turned to dust, their presence persisted, encoded in quantum fields, in the pattern of orbital drift, in the structure of space-time around where Earth had once hung like a defiant jewel in the void. The eternal flame was not a message anymore. It had become a law. A fixed point the forgotten could not erase without unraveling parts of reality itself. Somewhere in the dark, they recalculated, reconsidered, and watched. Because the flame had done more than mark the end of humanity. It had set a precedent, a warning, that even in the face of annihilation, life could rise and burn louder than silence. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. And still the flame whispered. Not louder, just constant. 1,000 new civilizations rose across the stars. They didn't imitate humanity. They didn't try to rebuild the dominion. But in every one of them, in their music, in their art, in their defiance, there were shadows of Earth. Of Kane's final stand. Of Verma's last whisper. Of the ship with no surrender written into its core. On a lonely moon orbiting a black dwarf in unclaimed space, a child of a crystalline species asked her elder. Who were they? The elder answered. They were the ones who burned so brightly, even the darkness remembers. Somewhere far beyond the rim, beyond the light of known suns, a ripple passed through the void. A pulse. A flicker. And for the first time in unknown millennia, the forgotten turned away. Not in defeat, not in retreat, but in acknowledgement. Of a truth too loud to silence. Of a defiance too bright to extinguish. of a species that had made even oblivion blank. And the stars, once cold, carried forward that single flame. Forever.